Hi, good morning, everyone. This is our roundtable number 5, part of our Cayuga and Seneca Lakes Agriculture and Craft Beverage Memory Project in conjunction with Finger Lakes One and the Edith B. Memorial Library. So today we have two important panelists who will be talking about what this weather has been like this season. It's been quite a roller coaster. And so we wanted to get their input and feedback on, how things are going in the vineyards. So we have Cameron Hosmer from Hosmer Estate Winery, located on 7020 New York State Route 89 in Ovid, and Dave Wyden, vineyard manager at Sheldrake Point Winery at 7448 County Road 153 in Ovid, New York. So you're both about, 3 miles apart? But yet, as we will probably talk about, you can have significant changes between the vineyard as far as soil and drainage and climate. So even though you're very close, both on the western shore of Cayuga Lake, there will be differences. So hi, Cameron, can you tell me a little about yourself so our viewers can learn more about you?
I'm Cameron Hosmer. I'm the co-owner of Hosmer Winery in Ovid on the west shore of Cayuga Lake. I planted my first grapes here in 1972. We opened the winery in 1985. Prior to that, in that period between 72 and 85, we grew grapes and sold them primarily to the Taylor Wine Company in Hammondsport. We currently have a little over 65 acres of vineyard and produce around 10,000 cases of wine.
Oh, okay. All right, and thank you. So Dave, can you tell me about yourself, your background, and when you started at Sheldrake Point Winery?
Okay, I started at Sheldrake Point 1999, and we've planted we've got about 60 acres in the ground right now, and we're pretty much planted out at Sheldrake. Prior to Sheldrake, I worked in the viticulture department at Cornell University. As a viticulture technician. I'm happily employed by Sheldrake Point Vineyards and Winery, and we're working through the changes in the climate. Feel pretty good about the future of things.
Yeah. Oh, great.
So far.
No, I know it's been, me, I'm not and I don't have any grapes or farms or anything like that, but it seems to be a real roller coaster this season as far as the weather. And can you tell me what was the winter like? Did you have early bud break? Was that and how was the spring? If you could run through the season since this 2021 season, that would be great.
Well, everybody has their own memory, but I'll give you mine. Yeah, we had kind of a mild winter. I'd say 0 bud mortality due to cold injury. Excuse me. Bud swell started a little bit early. There's some nervousness about having early bud break prior to the frost-free season being over. There was a little bit of tension about that. So, but we got past that. We didn't get any bud injury in the spring, and the season was pretty good up until bloom, and bloom had a kind of a cool wet period for a while, and that did cause a little bit of trouble. And then, after berry set, we got into July, and I think we had very wet conditions almost every day in July, and that was a bit of a challenge. It was probably the wettest July I've seen. So maybe back to 92, it might have been that wet in 92. But there's a lot of spraying going on in July, trying to keep things under control. So, yeah.
Right, and you have a great deal of drainage. I think somebody mentioned Howard gravelly loam when I interviewed Chuck. And does that make a factor, your drainage and all
Yeah,
that?
Good drainage is essential in the vineyard. You gotta have that, and with you can amend the soil drainage, but it's pretty hard to amend the air drainage. And that is equally important in the growing season, to have good air drainage. And without, how do you describe the problem with bad air drainage? it's, if you have a foggy, cloudy day or in the summertime or a period that the fog tends to stay around for a longer period of time and create better conditions to grow disease. So we ran into some of that trouble with one block of Merlot and lost a few tons of grapes because of what seems like bad air drainage, but haven't quite figured it out yet. So
That was this year you lost?
Yeah.
these?
yeah,
Wow. Now,
yeah.
Sheldrake is that area is actually the deepest part of Seneca, of Cuga Lake rather, correct?
Yes. I think the conditions as far as water depth are similar between ours and Hosmer's. And the benefit of the deep water is it offers more heat in the wintertime. That's the only benefit, is it keeps you from getting as cold in the winter. So
Oh, and so you lost this big crop of Merlot, you said, correct? Or
yeah, we lost about half of it or more. And it was something kind of unusual, is downy mildew inside the berries. And that happened, I believe, during that damp season, or damp period during berry set, but I'm not quite sure yet. So
yeah, I know we had that enormous snowstorm kind of late in the winter too.
yeah, that doesn't bother anything. The depth of the snow doesn't bother the buds. It's the acute low temperatures that get them. And we didn't have any of that this winter. So it was a very mild winter as far as the grapes are concerned.
Okay, and do you think that's your only loss of grape?
Oh yeah, so far. Well, you always lose some Riesling, it seems, but
Wow.
I've never had this much trouble with Merlot. It's kind of unusual. Yeah, I don't know exactly what happened yet. So
Oh. And, Cameron, how about you? Have you had any significant losses of grapes or parts of your vineyard this year?
Nope. No, we've had, you want to talk about this season, the winter was mild, we came through that just fine. No spring frost to worry about. Sure, July was kind of wet. We had to, accelerate our disease control program a little bit because of the rain. But the upside of that, rainy period in, late spring and into July is that the vines are quite lush. The crop is good size. The vines are extremely healthy, and they're lush and green, and there's plenty of grapes there. And we're looking forward to a spectacular harvest this year. And we got a long ways to go between now and the end of October, which is, harvest generally starts, early mid-September and goes through the end of October. So, we're really not in charge here, and we do have a ways to go. But at this point, I think that the 2021 vintage is looking spectacular.
Okay. Well, one person told me, well, I'll ask you this question first. What do you see as the greatest threat to the vineyard? Like, what is the worst memory that you have from past seasons that you would like to talk about?
The biggest threat for any vineyard is hail. Hail at any time, hail is good for nothing as far as I'm concerned. And it can strike with a vengeance. It can eliminate your whole crop in a matter of seconds. And it's very localized. It can hail at my house and not 100 yards away. And so, you're lucky if you avoid hail. It's just, it's a real tough customer. And I always say that here in the Finger Lakes, hail season is in the first 2 weeks of June. You get through that, the chances of hail being devastating become less.
Yeah, I know last year I spoke to somebody I think it was about August, and he said it was probably the best crop ever. Things were going really great, and some bizarre isolated hailstorm came along and within just minutes wiped out about 50% of his crop, which was
Yep.
So
yeah,
it's horrible. And in fact, I know Hal, I think you had mentioned once before, I actually found this article.
It's a, it's a deadly critter for us in the vineyards.
Yeah, I found this article from, I think, 1897. And it was from a local newspaper. And then the original article came from the Trumansburg Free Press, 1897. The vineyard of R.J. Hunt near East Varick was directly hit in the path of a recent hailstorm, and forms that his crop was practically ruined. So scarcely a bunch of remains untouched by the hailstone. So this has been a problem, and I guess you can't predict it. You really can't predict it. How about Dave? Do you have any opinions? Have you ever had any loss?
No, but we heard the hailstorm that went through Knapp Vineyard up on Ernsburg Road. You could hear it going by, it sounded like a freight train. And that hailstorm, what did it leave? 6 inches of hail on the ground, and they had no crop that year. And last year, Boundary Breaks got hit by a bit of hail and had some trouble. So yeah, that's definitely an issue. I don't know if it's happened more frequently now or not, but it's it does happen. So
Yeah, no, it's just, and there's nothing you can do about it. And all season, that's part of the reason I chose this topic of, what impact has your vineyard had this year? It suffered rather from the weather changes, because it's been such a roller coaster. If you've experienced anything like that, and the weather reports have often said this summer that, National Weather Service prediction of large hail. And I think every time I see that on my phone, I think, oh no, I hope not, because from what I've heard from other vineyard managers, that's probably one of the worst.
yeah, so far we're lucky that way. So
So
Me too.
yeah, so I was concerned, have the really heavy downpours that we've suffered really this summer. You haven't experienced any mold or damage from the rains. And what do you do? Do you go out every day and inspect the vines? What do both of you do? I don't know if Cameron wants to talk first.
We really haven't had any torrential rains here, and they've gone around us, and we hear stories of, oh, we got 5 inches of rain in 2 hours. Well, that didn't happen here. We've had what I would say normal rainfall. Sure, we had a storm brought maybe, 1.25 inches of rain maximum in one rainstorm. And our soils can handle that. We have good drainage, and we have full cover crops. And, we didn't see any, I would say, soil erosion. And the drainage takes care of the excess water. And, we're fortunate. I think that those heavy rainstorms, those multi-inch rainstorms have, gone around us, which, just, the old story, would you rather be lucky or good? I think we're lucky.
Okay. Dave, what do you have an opinion on that? Do you think, I've been wondering if perhaps the super hot periods that we've had, if that's counteracted some of the moisture that's been, I know in Sheldrake, what was it, 3 years ago, there was an enormous flood, lots of damage. And yet your vineyard is what, a couple 100 feet away from where some of the homes were, and you didn't really
we did.
experience a lot of damage.
There was more disease pressure that year. Like we had to ramp up our spray schedule, and that's, what was that, August 9th? That rain, we had 8 or 9 inches of rain in Ovid. And I know where some of those storms went that Tucker missed. They came our way. We had one day, one night, we had 4 inches of rain overnight. And the next day we had a couple more, washed our driveways out and whatnot, but didn't move the soil around the grapes. It just, made us a bit of work in the driveways. And one thing I have noticed is it's hot enough more often to get sulfur burns. So I have to be more cautious. Sulfur is something, a fungicide we use to control powdery mildew. And we have to be more cautious about putting sulfur on in June, which is something I never had to pay too much attention to. And that seems to be a minor change. So I don't know if anyone else is seeing that. So
So you've been with Sheldrake for, what did you say, over 20 years?
yeah,
Have you seen like some increase concerns over this time or?
oh, just it seems to be a little bit warmer, just a bit. Like I have to be more cautious in June with sulfur, and it's been the past 2 years, been a little bit warmer. So in June, it seems to be sporadic, the heat, like it's warmer in June, maybe not as warm in July, but yeah. But so far, that's about it.
And so, yeah, people always say grapes don't like wet feet. What does
Yeah.
that mean? Can you explain that to our
Sure.
people watching?
Well, wet feet causes winter injury. And if you have cold winters with grapes with wet feet, you're going to have a lot of vine mortality. So that's why we're all so keen to have drainage tile and well-drained, drainage tile in the vineyard with well-drained soils is to prevent wet feet. You'll find out where the wet spots are after a cold, wet winter like 2018. There's a lot of vine mortality if you had any wet spots at all. So yeah, that's a change.
That's very true. Back 40 years ago when we established a vineyard, sure, we put tile in and we put them in 50, 75 feet apart, the artificial tile drains, and now that's probably 3 times as much tile in a newly planted acre of grapes. And that's something that we learned, but also we're planting varieties that are much more winter sensitive and are more sensitive to wet feet. Back in the 60s, they didn't plant Chardonnay and they didn't plant Riesling. It was Catawba and Concord. And so, and they're fairly rugged, and they're, native varieties. So they're built to live here. And, those vinifera varieties, this is not really their home. And so we artificially make it their home by installing lots of drainage, and that makes them happy. So we put give them a good place to live, but that took some time to figure out.
So what percentage of your grapes, if any, are hybrids? Are they all, because I know Cornell has established or created so many grapes that are, cold hardy and more disease resistant. That must be extremely helpful to you, or has improved.
Well, we back in the early 70s, we planted hybrids for various wineries in the Hampsport area, and because that's what they wanted. And since then, we've planted, almost primarily the vinifera varieties, which consist, and but I think that they're in the future, it would be the plant breeders are working at it hard is varieties that are have the same characteristics as their traditional vinifera varieties, but have natural resistance to disease, and also maybe some winter hardiness that built into them. So, that is the future. I'm sure of it. It's going to take a long time.
The vinifera varieties are much more difficult to care for than the hybrids. The hybrids are so easy. They're great. You take something like Hugo White, and you prune it, you tie it, spray it, and you harvest it in late September, early October. It's super. So
because they're designed to be, they're engineered really to be disease resistant and cold hardy. So there's the advantage. Can you talk about the distinction between the two? I know people feel like, well, they're
well, vinifera grapes, you have to be pretty punctual with your spray schedule, and they're hardy to, say, about say Riesling's hardy to -12 or so, below 0, and Hugo White might be a little lower than that. What do you think, Tucker? Is Hugo White down good to -14, 15?
Barely. I mean, this winter hardiness is not significantly less than, say, Riesling,
Right.
but it's fairly disease resistant. It's extremely productive, and makes a style, has its use in wine. It's very versatile and makes sparkling wine and table wine, and that's we call it the Wonder Grape because Cornell developed it and released it in 1972, and it lives here pretty well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Makes a pile of grapes, that's for sure. Without
I know the term tiles, drainage tile. I know somebody recently said, well, they're plastic pipes, but the term actually, they were originally terracotta tiles that were used really first here in Seneca County by John Johnston. But the term tile still refers to the drainage form, but they're long pipes for those who don't know what we're talking about, right?
Right.
They're
Right.
just large, the PVC
We-
perforated. I'm sorry.
we've
Ken?
got lots of that. We have lots of that clay pipe tile that we put in here, 1 foot sections that we installed in the 70s, and I did a lot of that. And then that was prior to the sort of the invention of the plastic perforated drain tile. So we have both concrete 1 foot pieces of concrete 4-inch pipe. It's quite difficult to put in, and a lot of labor, and the red clay tile, which is it's what we had back then.
Right, I'm surprised. I didn't know that they were still in use into the 70s,
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
you work a field that hasn't been worked in a while, like putting drainage tile, and you'll come across that, and you have to kind of make adjustments in your drainage tile layout to include that. So
it's still working, it's still functioning very well, those older,
if
you
you
have to
don't,
modify them a little bit.
you gotta hook it up, otherwise you run into trouble. It's
All right, well, is there anything else you'd like to add other than, I know there's been a lot of talk about, the current threats to the vineyards, including the spotted lanternfly, and luckily we haven't spotted any here. Is that something you go out often and look for, Dave?
I watch the papers for that one. I hope I don't see it at my vineyard. Boy, that's going to be a new feature.
Let's keep that critter away.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think people see, wine and the bottle of wine, and it's very, glamorous, but in fact, it's a lot of work. And so it must be very stressful all the time to wonder, from day to day, basically you're at the mercy of the weather and what's going to happen today.
Well, the thing of it is you can't worry about what you can't control. And sometimes I find myself falling into worrying about what I can't control. And it's wait, I'm doing everything I can. You can't let it get to you. So
I have a saying, we're not in charge.
yeah.
Well,
we're just guests here. And Dave's absolutely right. You can do everything right and still lose.
Yeah.
right. And you, I know, are been very good stewards. Both of you are interested in being, stewards of the land. Sheldrick has installed a lot of solar panels. And so has that been helpful? Do you see that as being the direction of?
It's hard to get enough power out of solar panels to run a winery, especially if you're limited to the roof of the winery. That's just not enough space. We did an estimate on how many acres of solar panels it would take, and it was somewhere like 2.5 acres of solar panels to make the amount of power we use. We try to be good stewards, but it's almost in conflict with running the vineyard. It's a hard thing to do. So the solar panels on the roof, they make about 10% of the power we use. I'd like to have more, but the cost benefit is really hard to work out. So
Well, I think that, both Dave and I have been pretty vigilant about, water protection. And, Cuba Lake's a great, nice, clean source of water. And, we do our best to protect that water source. And, I like to say that, water is our most valuable resource in the world by far. So, for example, don't put any gasoline. If you can't put gasoline in your car for 3 days, you'll probably be okay. Don't have a drink of water for 3 days and tell me how you feel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. And speaking of erosion, what changes have you seen in how the vineyards are maintained over the years? I know one person spoke about not mowing in between the rows. Has there been a big change in how they're maintained over the years since you've been at the hospital? You just had a big anniversary. Was it 35 years at
Yeah,
hospital?
for the winery.
Right.
But we've been growing grapes here for close
Right.
to 50 years. And the biggest change I would say is back, 40 years ago, we cultivated every row or every other row. We would disc it and leave it as bare ground. And that set your soil up for erosion and washing the soil into the lake. And we don't do that anymore. And no, very few people do that anymore. So that's a big change.
Yeah, we maintain grassy margins at, headlands at the ends of the vineyard. And if anything was to wash out of the vineyard, and you don't see that very often unless you have, 10 inches of rain overnight, the grassy headland would capture that before it hit the lake. And that's, kind of an absolute thing that we like to see, is that the grass before the lake. So it kind of filters things out and even stops most of the water from going directly into the lake.
Right. No, and that's been a more recent, used to be like clear cut almost, very groomed and clear in between the rows.
Yep.
If you went to an old orchard, for example, you'd find the terrain in the orchard was held up around the trees. And that was not that they piled the dirt up around the trees, it's that they wore the soil down so much around the trees from clearing it out with a disc over and over again. So.
Well, I appreciate the time that you both have put in. I know, I hope that this will be a great season for you, and perhaps we can have an update, and hopefully at harvest time, you can let me know how it worked out for you and how many tons. I don't know how many tons you usually end up harvesting, Dave, at Sheldrake, tons of.
Oh, somewhere around 250, 260, somewhere in there.
Okay. Yeah. How about you, Cameron?
Oh, around 300 or so tons. Yeah, depends on the year. And like I say, so far so good. Keep our fingers crossed.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you both for your time. I appreciate you spending the Monday morning here. I know it's very busy in the vineyard, so I appreciate the time.